Hi guys, James here. I'm just going to be doing a quick one today because it's something I promised that I'd do a while ago. I'm going to just be looking at the special edition of the Paul McCartney album Flowers in the Dirt, which was released in, I think, 1989, it says here, yeah. Flowers in the Dirt was a kind of comeback album for Paul McCartney. The previous album to this was Press to Play, which was a collaboration largely with Eric Stewart from 10cc, produced by Hugh Padgham, who'd done some of the Genesis stuff in the 80s, and the album had flopped, and McCartney, I think, was on a bit of a low ebb as far as his confidence was concerned. He'd also performed at Live Aid as well, where his microphone went down, and various things had happened. And I think the Beatles, the sort of legacy of the Beatles, had sort of been on the wane for a while in the 80s. Their currency was not great, and I think they were seen as being a little bit passé. I'll talk about that again in a sec when I talk about my experience of going away to university. Sorry, my voice is a bit funny this morning. Excuse me. But then he made Flowers in the Dirt, and the reason he made this album was because he was going out on tour and he was going to be doing a big world tour. He got his first live band together since the demise of Wings several years before, and I think he said at the time that he didn't want to be stuck out on the road somewhere in America and Europe, being dragged down by, I think in his words, he used the words, a crummy album. He said he wanted to have an album that he was really proud of. So he set to work, and I mean, he's done this subsequently. Rather than working with one producer, he worked with several different people. He worked with Trevor Horn, Steve Lipson. He also worked, of course, with Elvis Costello, and there are some collaborations with Costello on this album. So I'm just going to show you what's in this special edition, and then I'm going to just talk a little bit about my experience of seeing Paul McCartney on the Flowers in the Dirt tour. So this is the box. This is number 08749, and you open it up, and the album is the thing that gives the lovely colour at the front. So this is the actual record. This is actually unplayed. I've never played this vinyl record because I have the album on CD, and it's a good sounding CD. Nice yellow inlay, and the record has one of McCartney's lovely specialised labels. I'm going to do a feature on McCartney's labels at some point, because a lot of his albums, particularly in the 1970s, had their own kind of custom-made labels, which are actually really, really nice, some of them. So that's the record, and then also inside here you had a variety of different things. You had a bookmark, I'd rather be listening to Paul McCartney. We have, let's see, this was a limited edition single of a song called Party Party, which was kind of like a studio jam really with his band at the time. The band consisted of Paul and Linda, obviously, let me get this right, Chris Whitten on drums, who then went on to be in Dire Straits, Paul Wickens, the keyboard player who's still with him now, Robbie McIntosh from The Pretenders, and Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band. That was the band that he assembled for this tour. And Party Party really is a kind of studio jam featuring those musicians. It's not a great record, but it's quite nice to have it, I suppose. We have a tour itinerary. And just looking at through this, whether I can work out which one I was at, it would have been one of these dates here. I went to one of these in London from, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He did 10 consecutive nights at Wembley Arena in January of, would have been 1990, I suppose. And I was at one of them. Prior to that, he'd been at Birmingham NEC for 6 nights. Prior to that, he'd been at Madison Square Garden, the Forum, various venues in America. Very busy tour. It was a big tour for McCartney. It was a big kind of, huge kind of comeback, really. Here we have a set of quite nice postcards. There's Linda, Chris Whitten, the drummer, Paul and Linda again, Wicks, Hamish and Robbie. Then there was a poster, which I will show you. Quite a nice poster. Again, it's never adorned my wall. I've never taken it out really, apart from to look at it briefly. That's the poster. And then we have a, oh sorry, missed that one. Another postcard of McCartney. And this is possibly my favourite item in this record. This is one of these peat frame Rock Family tree things. Everybody's seen these. This is a really good one. This is a Rock Family tree of all the various members of McCartney's band at the time, including McCartney himself, of course. So you can see Wings down there. You can see the Average White Band down here. You can see the Pretenders. All the various members' careers basically mapped out. I do really like Pete Frame's family trees. They were a big influence on me in my teens. You know, I really got interested in the kind of, you know, the sort of rock family tree and who played in what band. I might talk about that on another video with reference to Birmingham bands. I got really heavily into the sort of Birmingham. I mean, the history of Birmingham rock, you know, is just really, really interesting. You know, from Steve Gibbons' band through to Moody Blues, you know, all just a really interesting story. Anyway, I completely digress. Back to McCartney. So, the Flowers in the Dirt tour was an attempt by McCartney, really, and the album too, to kind of come back and sort of, you know, try and prove again that he was a major artist. And I know that, as far as this album is concerned, it was very well received at the time, but I think history now looks back on it perhaps a bit less kindly than McCartney, I'm sure, himself expected at the time. People don't sort of rate this album as much anymore, perhaps, as some of his other albums, but I've always really liked this. All the songs on here I think are really, really, really good. You know, there's My Brave Face, Distractions, which is a lovely ballad. We Got Married, which is absolutely fantastic, David Gilmour guitar on it. Put It There, which is his little tribute to his dad, Jim McCartney. This One, which is a really good song with really, really wacky McCartney lyrics. That Day Is Done, which is a very strong Costello collaboration. How Many People? It's just, yeah, I think overall this is a really strong album, and I think it did the job for McCartney. Really, it helped him sort of come back and you know, really sort of remind people, I suppose, of what a force he'd been. Yeah, I mean, I saw McCartney on that tour, and it was a pretty good experience. I think I was maybe 18, 19. I'd never seen McCartney before. I've been a big Beatles fan, a big Wings fan, and I didn't have a very good seat really in the arena. I was in the stalls at the back of the stage, really, so I was looking down at McCartney's back for most of the show. He was kind of in profile, but with his back kind of half to me, but I was quite near to him. And I do remember thinking at the time, wow, you know, that's Paul McCartney on that stage, you know, really quite close. And there was one stage during the show where the seating bank where me and my friend was sat, we seemed to be making more noise in the arena after one of the songs than anyone else. And McCartney seemed to become aware of this, and he sort of turned towards where we were all sat and pretended to jump up onto the rigging in order to, you know, to sort of get to us. I think he was responding to this kind of wave of energy that was coming off that particular side of the arena. Of course, I mean, he's a consummate showman, isn't he? Someone like McCartney would be all too aware of the people kind of, you know, sat behind. There are some, you know, people who play gigs, it wouldn't even occur to them, like, you know, I need to make sure that I kind of, you know, go towards those people. Maybe it's the result of those early Beatles tours where they used to play on those, you know, revolving stages, so he was always aware that there were people behind him. I don't know. Anyway, it was a really good concert, and at the time I wasn't even that aware of some of the Beatles stuff. I'd been more of a Wings fan, really, you know, because I'd grown up in the 1970s, and some of the Beatles stuff wasn't that familiar to me. Even songs like Hey Jude, you know, I didn't know them intimately, So it was a really interesting experience. And then a few months after that, in the summer of that year, 1990, I went to the Albert Docks in Liverpool and saw him again. Much bigger show, but essentially the same set. And that was a really good gig as well. Good, really good concert. I think it was a kind of a big, tremendous homecoming for him. I think he had a bit of a tear in his eye at the end. It was a big, Liverpool show. And that was a good band. I always thought I preferred that band to the band that he has now. The band on Flowers in the Dirt, I thought, was a really good tight band. Not that the band he's got now are not tight, but I find that they have quite a sort of heavy-handed approach. The drummer guy, he seems to think he's in Metallica or something. I don't know. They just seem a bit geared towards, I don't know, sort of like a hard rock sound or something, which I don't think always suits the McCartney sound. This band, I think, was a really excellent band. Robbie McIntosh was a great guitarist. Hamish Stewart, brilliant bass player. I just bought an album by the Average White Band in the last couple of weeks. Actually, the one that they did with Benny King, and brilliant band. Absolutely great. I think McCartney chose well. I think he'd come out of the Wings years. The final Wings lineup he hadn't been very happy with, because I think he'd allowed Denny Lane to get the band together just using his mates, and McCartney hadn't really auditioned people carefully enough, I don't think, even though there were some good musicians in that band. I think when it came to do this album, he really wanted to make sure that he came in with the sort of absolute best people, and I think he did. I've not been to see McCartney since then. I think what was great about him then was that he wasn't everywhere, in the way he is now. He hadn't started, I don't think, well, it was the beginning of him starting to milk the Beatles' legacy, I think. He was still doing quite a lot of Wings songs and solo songs on this tour, but it was the first tour where he'd really taken a look at the Beatles' back catalogue. He had done it in Wings, of course, a bit. He'd done 2 or 3 songs from Wings in those days, back in the 1970s, but on this tour, for the first time, I think he decided to sort of step up to the plate and be Beatle Paul. And I think it was the novelty of that which made it quite exciting. It was like, here's this guy coming back, addressing his legacy. And for me, since then, I think he's overexposed himself. I think he's done I don't want to say he's done too much. I mean, he's done some good albums, but he's done all those Vegas shows, and he just seems to be everywhere all the time. And I don't know. I think he's been chasing his tail a bit and being a bit too desperate to try and remind people of who he is and what his legacy was, and pretending, or not pretending, but claiming to have co-written some famous John Lennon songs, and I do think, and it's perhaps not, it's quite a strange thing to say, but I haven't liked him as much since Linda's death. I think there was something about the collaboration between him and Linda which was actually quite special, even though she was a bit out of tune with her singing. I thought she was quite a good little keyboard player, really. Sounds quite patronising, doesn't it? But I think Linda was good for Paul, and I think since her death, I wouldn't say he's kind of lost his way, but I've been less into his music, really, since she died. And when I look back at McCartney's career, I have a special fondness for this era, but I also do love the Wings stuff as well. And I have a Paul McCartney story, which I'm going to relate in a future video, and that is the night I watched a movie with Paul McCartney. But I'll save that for another day. Anyway, I've got a dash. This video's gone on a bit longer than I intended. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's the Flowers in the Dirt special edition. Take care, folks. Bye.